Chapter 7. Welcome to state-of-the-art travel in the 19th century, my friends, said the swamper. The stagecoach. Luke and Jenny discovered they were perched on top of a stagecoach. Whoa! Yelled Luke as the stagecoach jerked along. They were in for a bumpy ride. Hang on, Luke, you'll be all right, said the swamper. It was a dark night and it must have been cold. Luke could see patches of snow on the ground, and the driver and the stagecoach guard wore heavy coats. It was the night of March 15th, 1881, the swamper said, and that time of year could still have pretty cold nights. Besides being cold, he explained that stagecoach travel could be quite dangerous because of highwaymen or robbers. And they had to be on the lookout for Indians, too. The stagecoach bumped and swayed as it made its way down the road. Sort of feels like riding a roller coaster, huh, Luke? Asked Jenny. Yeah, replied Luke with a big smile. This is really cool. He looked over at the swamper and asked, So where are we and why are we here? Before the swamper could answer, Jenny spoke up. She was looking over the driver's head and pointing at something in the road. What's up with that? She asked. Luke turned toward the road. A figure had stepped out of the shadows and onto the roadway. That man must be in trouble or needs some help or something, his sister said. It looks like he's trying to flag down the stagecoach. Actually, that's not quite right, Jenny, said the swamper. This is how stagecoaches get robbed. Robbed? Gasped Jenny. I think we're about to get into trouble, said Luke. The man on the roadway raised his arms and yelled, Hold! The guard, who is a big man, responded by saying, I hold for no one. Several more men appeared in the roadway as the guard picked up his shotgun and took aim. Loud shots rang out into the night air, and Luke and Jenny ducked for cover. Then the stagecoach suddenly lunged forward. Luke and Jenny grabbed hold of the top railings. Then Luke looked up. Look out! The driver was falling forward. Jenny tried to grab him, but as she wrapped her arms around his waist, he fell right through them. They watched in horror as he fell off the coach. Now I know we're in trouble, shouted Luke. The man fired off a few more rounds at the robbers. Luke and Jenny looked back to see the poor driver lying in the roadway behind them. Jenny looked at Luke. I think the guard may have got one of the bad guys, she shouted, but it's too dark to tell for sure. Luke looked forward and shouted, So now who's driving the stage? Jenny turned around and saw the guard was gone too. We're toast, exclaimed Luke as he and Jenny held on tight. He knew that they would have been much better off on a real roller coaster. At least they would have been able to stop. The team of horses, frightened by the sound of gunfire, was running away without a driver to stop them. Don't worry, you'll be okay, said the swamper. Look, Luke, shouted Jenny as she looked down to the front of the stage. Luke saw that the guard had climbed down from his seat and had crawled onto the wagon tongue. He looked back at Jenny. If he makes it, I promise I won't complain about this vacation being boring again. He and Jenny held their breath as they watched him reach down and manage somehow, one by one, to get the reins off the ground. Once he had all the reins back, he carefully backed himself off the tongue and climbed onto the driver's seat. After a few minutes of pulling back on the reins, he managed to get the horses back under control. Whew, that was close, exclaimed Jenny as the stagecoach finally came to a halt. As the dust settled, they heard some of the people out inside the stagecoach shouting, He's been shot, he's hit, he's hurt real bad. The guard bent his head to look into the window. Hold on, he exclaimed. I'll get that man to a doctor fast. He whipped the horses and the stagecoach shot forward again. Ah! Yelled Jenny, falling backward while the stagecoach went forward. Luke kept hold of the rail with one hand while he held the other hand out to help his sister. Are you okay? He asked. Uh-huh, she replied. As she pulled herself back up, she looked around. That's funny. That should have hurt, but it didn't. She looked at the swamper. That's because we're not really here, right? The swamper smiled and nodded his head. What happened inside the stagecoach? Asked Luke. One of the passengers was accidentally shot by the robbers, explained the swamper. Is he going to be all right? Asked Jenny. No, I'm afraid he isn't, said the swamper. While they sped along the road, the swamper told them that the guard was a friend of Wyatt Earp's named Bob Paul. A few minutes later, they arrived in Benson. Bob brought the stagecoach to a sudden halt, leaped from the stagecoach, and quickly ran to get help. We might as well get off here, said the swamper. Bob will return in a couple of minutes, and he'll go back to check on his driver, Bud Philpott. You'll discover that poor Bud didn't make it either. His death will cause a great outrage among the law-abiding citizens of Tombstone. Sheriff Johnny Behan is going to form a posse to go after them, and we're going to ride along.